help the Afghan people without giving political legitimacy to the Taliban. This was the line reiterated by G20 countries at a summit on Afghanistan, hosted by Italy. The EU has put forward a proposal to provide €1 billion for the country. This includes the €300 million already pledged for humanitarian aid.
Current humanitarian emergency in Afghanistan is getting very serious.
È gravissima.
Representatives of international institutions in the United Nations have spoken of a real humanitarian catastrophe.
Una domanda da Ilario Lombardo, La Stampa.
Draghi added that shoring up the country's currency must be a priority.
We have to prevent the economic collapse of the country, and that means that we have to prevent immediately that the payment system of the country collapses and no more payments can be made. Because then it will be very difficult to provide humanitarian aid.
Meanwhile, a Taliban delegation met with EU and US representatives in Doha. Over the weekend, the Taliban and the US engaged in informal talks in what was the first face-to-face meeting since the takeover in Kabul.
The UN Secretary-General Antonio Guterres warned earlier this week that the world must take action on Afghanistan, saying that the country is at a make-or-break moment. But how much will that pledge from G20 leaders yesterday go towards helping the country out of its crisis? Well, to help us answer that question, we can talk now to Graham Smith. He's a senior consultant for Afghanistan at the International Crisis Group. Oh, thanks for taking time to speak to us here on the programme. We've heard about that multi-billion-dollar pledge. Of course, this cash has to be channeled through the United Nations. How is that going to work, and is it enough?
No, it's not enough, and nobody can really tell you how it's going to work, unfortunately. The international community was caught by surprise when the Taliban captured the country on the 15th of August. And ever since then, they've been sort of making it up as they go along. It's actually never happened before that listed terrorists take over an entire country. And so there are all these very complicated implications. Development funding has been slammed shut. Sanctions now seem to apply very broadly to huge sections of the economy, which is why you, part of the reason why you see these pictures of Afghans lining up outside of banks. There's a liquidity crisis. No one can physically get any money because the Americans used to be flying in shipments of cash for weekly currency auctions that are no longer happening. And so there's a currency crisis. It's all of these overlapping concerns all at the same time. So it's a very difficult set of issues for the international community to untangle.
Is it only a matter of time then before the international community is forced to recognize the Taliban? Will that help or hinder matters?
Well, diplomatic recognition is actually a separate thing. The very first steps that need to be taken are further easing of the sanctions so that it becomes legal, for example, to bring in spare parts for mobile phone towers, so that it becomes legal to import electricity into the country. Just these really basic things. Diplomatic recognition, all of the international community members have said this will depend on how the Taliban behave in the coming months and years, that they're not interested really as much in what the Taliban are saying, but what they will do. They are focused, for example, on whether or not secondary schools for girls continue to open up, as they have started to in a few provinces, but the international diplomats gathered there in Doha have all been raising these concerns about the status of women and girls under the Taliban government. And so those are the kinds of more broad issues I think that you'll see people raising when they start talking about diplomatic recognition in the future.